Let's kick this explainer off by taking a trip back to the early 2000s. Specifically, we're looking at the broadcast years from 2000 to 2006 for Clifford the Big Red Dog. What we're going to do today is break down exactly how public grants and corporate branding were meticulously stitched together to create a 15-second viewing experience that, honestly, is probably still burned into your brain right now.
But before we dive in, let me ask you something that might spark some serious nostalgia if you grew up watching PBS Kids. Do you remember exactly who brought you Clifford? Like, right when that theme song starts up, what corporate names immediately pop into your head? Just hold on to that thought, because we're about to deconstruct exactly how those brands got so deeply rooted in your head in the first place.
Here's our roadmap for the explainer. We'll start with the nostalgia of funding, move into the public broadcasting backbone, look at when corporate brands meet education, then decoding the sponsor messages, and we'll wrap it all up with the ultimate funding blend.
All right, Section 1. The nostalgia of funding.
Seriously, just think about the phrase kid-tested, mother-approved. Through constant daily repetition over a solid 6-year period, catchy corporate slogans like this one from Kick Cereal became deeply, deeply embedded in the whole viewing experience. You know, as a kid, you weren't sitting there thinking you were watching a commercial block. You were just impatiently waiting for your favorite big red dog to show up. But in that waiting period, those sponsors had a completely captive audience. That repetition wasn't an accident. It was a highly calculated way to cement brand recognition way before a kid ever even set foot in a grocery store aisle.
Moving right along to Section 2, the public broadcasting backbone.
So the overarching funding formula for PBS programming basically rested on 3 distinct pillars. You had public grants, corporate sponsors, and the viewers themselves. But it always started with the heavy lifting of government grants. That was the anchor. The broadcast absolutely had to establish its educational and public service credentials first, right before introducing any sort of commercial element into the mix.
Notice how the credits always established authority using this incredibly formal, bureaucratic language. You'd hear phrases like Television Cooperative Agreement, U.S. Department of Education, and Corporation for Public Broadcasting. Honestly, it sounds more like the opening of a legal document than a kids' show, doesn't it? But that stiff, authoritative tone was incredibly intentional. It signaled directly to the parents sitting in the room that what their child was about to watch was officially sanctioned, highly educational, and federally supported.
Which brings us to Section 3, corporate brands meet education.
Now, check out the dramatic tonal shift happening right before your eyes here. There is this stark, almost funny contrast between the stiff government text on the left and the playful, inviting brand messaging on the right. In literally the exact same breath, the announcer transitions from the dry U.S. Department of Education straight into Kix welcomes you to another healthy serving of good things to grow on. These corporations had a really unique challenge. They were absolutely advertising, but they couldn't sound like they were advertising. They had to sound like they were a natural part of the curriculum.
Chuck E. Cheese's is a prime example of this. They continually use their classic phrase, where a kid can be a kid, to align their brand with the ultimate freedom and joy of childhood. But when you drop that into the context of PBS Kids, this well-known arcade and pizza chain slogan suddenly takes on a slightly different vibe. They aren't just selling arcade tokens anymore. They're actively positioning themselves as champions of child development and play.
Brands were incredibly clever about adapting to this environment. Take Kick Cereal. They took their standard famous product slogan, kid-tested, mother-approved, and just smartly attached it to the concept of education. They actually tweaked the copy to say, the fun of learning is kid-tested, mother-approved. Think about how brilliant that is. They took the implicit trust parents have in educational programming and transferred it directly onto a box of puffed corn. They snagged the child's interest in the fun and secured parental trust in the learning.
Let's look at Section 4, decoding the sponsor messages.
The crucial thing to notice here is how clearly each corporation mapped its messaging directly to a specific developmental goal. Lipton Noodle Soup tells kids to use your noodle, which instantly turns a basic bowl of soup into a playful cognitive exercise. Danimals Yogurt claims to kickstart your child's growth and development. Milton Bradley frames their board games as my first games, heavily implying foundational learning. And Chuck E. Cheese's goes as far as explicitly stating they help children discover the fun of developing their bodies and their minds. Think about it. They are literally speaking the language of a preschool teacher, but they are selling consumer products.
By breaking down the transcript data, we can see these sponsors were systematically conditioning viewers. They didn't just flash a product on screen, they tied their products to universally positive themes.
Chuck E. Cheese's talked about how families and fun go hand in hand and how sharing is cool for real. Danimals focused entirely on physical health and flourishing. Meanwhile, Lipton and Kix leaned hard into cognitive development and curiosity. It was this brilliant, multi-pronged approach that covered pretty much every base a parent could possibly care about.
Brands like Chuck E. Cheese's even went out of their way to explicitly champion active participation over passivity. Just look at this quote, helping kids discover that doing something feels a whole lot better than doing nothing. Or there's another one where they say, the more you learn, the more you'll jump for joy. They are actively mirroring a teacher's lesson plan here. They're encouraging physical activity and engagement, which perfectly shielded the fact that their primary business model involved indoor arcades and video games.
And finally, Section 5, the ultimate funding blend.
Almost every single credit sequence we analyzed followed this exact structural formula. Step 1, that heavy, authoritative federal grant acknowledgement. Step 2, the seamlessly integrated, educationally themed corporate slogans from brands like Kix or Danimals. And finally, Step 3, the part that brings it all back home. It was a carefully crafted psychological journey designed to impart authority, subtly introduce commerce, and then immediately soften the whole thing with a sense of community.
Which brings us to the iconic concluding phrase that served as the ultimate grounding mechanism. After hearing about the U.S. Department of Education, and after being subtly marketed to by Chuck E. Cheese's and Lipton, the sequence always ended with, viewers like you. This completely validated the entire financial structure. It essentially told the audience, yes, the government is involved, yes, corporations are paying for this, but ultimately, this belongs to your local community. It belongs to you.
As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a final, somewhat provocative thought. We've looked at the transcripts, we've seen how Lipton told us to use our noodles and how Kix promised us their cereal was the fun of learning. So, did these corporate sponsors simply fund an educational broadcast out of the goodness of their hearts? Or did they successfully utilize the unquestionable authority of public broadcasting to permanently weave their products into our foundational childhood learning? It's definitely something to chew on the next time you feel a warm wave of nostalgia for a brand from your past. Thanks for exploring this with me, and remember, always keep asking questions about the media you consume.